What makes a great villain monologue? What separates those few great villainous soliloquies from the endless pit of cliche-riddled speeches about revenge and master plans and taking over the world?
You sly dog! You got me monologuing! I can't believe it!
Screenwriter Aaron Sorkin has a famous bit of writing advice regarding villains. You can't think of them as a villain. You can't judge them. You have to write the character as if they're making their case to God as to why they should be led into heaven. For all of the villainous characters Sorkin has written, there is no more famous or well-written example of this statement put into practice than Colonel Jessup's famous "You can't handle the truth" monologue from A Few Good Men. So today, we're going to break this monologue down, examining the elements that make this scene so effective. We will do this in 3 parts, looking at structure, character, and dialogue. Spoiler warning for A Few Good Men, especially the trial scene. A great monologue cannot exist in a vacuum. It needs context. No one speaks without reason. There is always an objective we're looking to attain, and using words to get there. In the case of Colonel Jessup's monologue, the context is extreme. 2 Marines are on trial for taking the life of their fellow Marine, Private Santiago. Their lawyer, Lieutenant Caffey, is attempting to prove in trial that they were operating under the orders of their commanding officer, Colonel Jessup. Knowing the context of a scene of dialogue establishes the stakes. In his great course, How to Write Best-Selling Fiction, author James Scott Bell states that the stakes of a story should always be life or death. This doesn't necessarily refer to physical death. The death at stake could be the death of a relationship, death of an opportunity, or death of a dream. At this point in the story, the death stakes are the death of freedom for the Marines, death of Caffey's career, and in a larger sense, the potential death of justice. Knowing the gravity of the situation beforehand gives the future dialogue infinitely more impact. The setting of the monologue is equally key. For what will ultimately be a battle of words, there could be no better setting than a courtroom. Courtrooms are closed arenas where lawyers square off in a battle of wits, wielding words like sword blades to parry and thrust, with victory belonging to whoever can win either a judge or jury to their side. Given what we know of the situation, we're aware that this is Caffey's one and only chance to bring down Colonel Jessup, a high-ranking military officer. In any other scenario, Jessup's rank and status would render him invulnerable, but for this one brief window, Caffey has a shot while the two are on equal footing. Another advantage of the setting is the inherent theatricality of the courtroom, where lawyers and witnesses look to exploit emotion to win support to their side. This theatricality allows for memorable, larger-than-life dialogue that would be considered hammy anywhere else. Caffey is taking an enormous risk in putting Colonel Jessup, a high-ranking military officer, on the stand. Such a move will torpedo his career if he can't get Jessup to confess to ordering the code red. Given the risk, the audience is sure to question why Caffey would even attempt this, given that Jessup will just deny giving the order. In an earlier scene, Caffey addresses this by saying he believed Jessup wants to admit to giving the order, that he's proud of it and wants everyone to know that he can't be challenged.
I think he wants to say that he made a command decision and that's the end of it. He eats breakfast 300 yards away from 4,000 Cubans that are trained to kill him.
We'll go more into this later. For now, we just need to be made aware that there is a strategy at play going into the confrontation between Caffey and Jessup. Caffey has an end goal: get Jessup to admit on the stand to ordering the code red. This makes the coming dialogue gripping before it even begins, as we have an end goal to listen for. We'll be hanging on every word to see if Caffey's risky strategy pays off. When breaking down a great monologue, you can't overlook the character actually doing the monologuing. For a villain monologue, this is all the more true. We should acknowledge here that some may consider Colonel Jessup to be more antagonist than full-on villain, but for the sake of this video, we'll stick with the term villain. For a villainous monologue to be effective, the villain must be imposing. As stated earlier, Jessup's rank alone helps establish this, but this will only get you so far. What makes him truly imposing is what we'll call his gravitational pull. Just as objects of massive weight bend space, causing smaller objects to orbit around them, massive characters bend the story world by the weight of their presence, causing events and other characters to yield to their will. This is how Colonel Jessup is presented to us, a man who has doors open for him, who others address as Sir while looking about self-consciously. Jessup's confidence is undeniable and unnerving. He answers questions sarcastically, addresses Kaffee condescendingly, and leaves the stand without being dismissed. He is the embodiment of imposing, a man unfamiliar with being challenged or questioned.
What do you want to discuss now? My favorite color?
So we've established that Jessup's confidence makes him imposing, but it's his intelligence that makes him dangerous. At one point in the questioning, Kaffee reveals the fact that although Jessup claims Santiago was being transferred, Santiago hadn't packed his bags the night before his supposed flight. This discrepancy calls into question Jessup's word, and Kaffee asks him to explain. At this point, it seems Kaffee actually has Jessup stumped, but it's here where Jessup reveals just what a formidable antagonist he really is. Rather than try to fumble his way to an answer, Jessup simply says he doesn't know why Santiago didn't pack, nor does he have to know. Jessup then mocks Kaffee's gambit, questioning whether he hung his entire case on such a flimsy argument.
Tell me that their lawyer hasn't pinned their hopes to a phone bill.
It's now clear that outwitting Jessup won't be an easy task. Kaffee will have to play on one final aspect of Jessup's psyche. Vince Gilligan, creator of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, once discussed in an interview the difficulty in defeating a villain in a satisfying way. The challenge is this: if you've created an intelligent villain who's able to see 3 steps ahead, how can the hero defeat them? Gilligan laments that in much of fiction, the villain simply gets dumb at the end of the story, making stupid mistakes that are completely out of sync with their character. So what's the solution? How does one create an intelligent villain who can still be defeated? A Few Good Men offers the perfect solution. Exploit a part of the villain's character that causes them to defeat themselves. As stated earlier, Colonel Jessup is a character of tremendous gravitational pull. He is a man used to having his own way. It's no surprise then that Jessup possesses a massive ego, bordering on God complex. This is the aspect of Jessup's character Kaffee alludes to before the trial, stating he believed Jessup wants to admit to ordering the Code Red. He wants to sit on the stand and declare his will and authority as absolute and beyond challenge. It is this declaration of absolute authority that Kaffee has been carefully guiding Jessup toward, poking the bear again and again, baiting him into lashing out. And when Jessup finally does, it's a thing of beauty. So with all the groundwork laid, we finally come to the monologue itself. As much as I would love to play it here in its entirety, I would never get this video uploaded. Instead, I'll include a link in the description so you can watch it all in its uninterrupted glory. One of the key and often overlooked hallmarks of iconic dialogue is repetition. This isn't to be mistaken with repetitive dialogue, in which a character continues saying essentially the same thing but in different ways. Intentional repetition is a dialogue tool in which a word or phrase is repeated to drive home a point or reprogram the listener. For example, take a look at this clip of broker Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
Notice how Gekko repeats and redefines the word greed until it loses its original definition. With this in mind, let's look at the beginning of Jessup's monologue.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns.
Later in the monologue, we get this.
You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall.
Do you notice the similarity in repetition to our Wall Street example, only with the word wall instead of greed? Just like Gekko, Jessup is using repetition to emphasize and redefine a word for his own advantage. There's almost a hypnotic effect to this, as Jessup hammers his point home again and again. Walls are necessary, walls protect us, and I'm the man defending the wall. It's a logic chain of his own devising, formed to justify his actions. I defend the wall, which protects us all, therefore neither myself or my methods can be questioned. Aaron Sorkin tells the story of going to a play as a young boy. He says that while he didn't understand what was being said, he loved the way the dialogue sounded, saying, "It sounded like music to me." It's no surprise then that Sorkin's dialogue has this rhythmic, musical quality. There's a back and forth as characters play rhythmically off each other in what has been called ping-pong dialogue.
He's 25 minutes late. He founded Napster when he was 19. He can be late. He's not a god. And what is he? He's 25 minutes late.
In the Colonel Jessup scene, we get this ping-ponging right at the beginning with, "I want the truth, you can't handle the truth." But what happens once we shift to full monologue? How does one person ping-pong with themselves? How do we hear the music and the words? That's what's so special about this monologue. In many ways, it's dialogue disguised as monologue. What does that mean? Well, in dialogue, two people alternate talking back and forth. But in his monologue, Jessup is doing the talking for both sides. Note how often Jessup speaks for Kaffee, saying things like,
You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marines.
By speaking for Kaffee, putting words in his mouth and insinuating his beliefs and intentions, Jessup plays a verbal chess game with himself, a game he cannot lose, because as long as he continues talking, he controls all the pieces. This playing both sides of the game is what makes his monologue so compelling. Imagine if he only used I statements, solely talking about and defending himself. The monologue would quickly grow stagnant. By alternating between I and you, we get this balanced back and forth, the ping pong effect. The balance creates that word music Sorkin spoke of. Listen to this part of the monologue.
We use words like honor, code, loyalty. We use these words as the backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline.
Do you hear the music? Do you hear how Jessup uses words as weapons? First we get this 1-2-3 punch of honor, code, loyalty, all delivered like gunshots. Then the rhythmic balance of us versus you.
We use words like honor, code, loyalty. We use these words as the backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline.
Memorable dialogue has flow, balance, and rhythm. It completes itself. In a sense, it rhymes, matching and balancing out like lines of poetry. As much as we could go on about balance and poetry and word syntax, at the end of the day, a villain monologue like Colonel Jessup's is iconic for what it does, for what it is. Like Sorkin said, it's a character's appeal to God as to why they should be led into heaven. Nothing left on the table, no punches pulled. We don't have to agree with Jessup. That's really not the point. The point is that we come away with the unshakable conviction that Colonel Jessup believes with all his heart that he is right, that he is justified. This isn't a villain twirling his mustache, cackling about how he loves being evil. It's a man with a God complex stating, "If I am a monster, then I am a necessary monster." These are the types of villains we as audiences find compelling. These are the monologues we find compelling. So I hope you found this useful. Comment below with what you believe is the best villain monologue in fiction, and subscribe for more writing content.